That's about it.
Right, exactly. Why pretend not to notice?
Oh, let's turn that camera on. Hello and welcome everybody to our author series event with poet Byron Hoot. Here he is with us, and probably the luckiest day of your life, nestled in between myself and Sarah Rossi over here. So we're so excited to have Byron with us. Byron is a poet who has been writing for many years, but has very recently, I would say, become very involved in the local literary community and been on a publishing frenzy. So Byron is a founder for the Tabernacle Writers Group. He's involved with Stained Glass Writers in Punxsutawney. He's involved with the Writers Block Party here with us and the Watershed Journal. He's been a consistent submitter to the Watershed Journal. And he was recently featured on Wacona Live, the Writers Conference of Northern Appalachia's series, video streaming series. And so Byron has read at lots and lots of open mic events, really across the country. And he joined us here today to read a selection of work from an unpublished manuscript. So this is recent work that you likely have not heard, even if you've been an avid follower. Byron also has a wonderful website where he does weekly readings, video readings, updates with tons of great content, and you can see all his books there too, and that's hootandhowpoetry.com. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, so some of you might be familiar with his work, his collaboration with Greg Clary, Piercing the Veil. And so this is an ekphrastic collection where photographer Greg Clary had photographs taken, really representative of the region that we live in. And then Byron wrote poems that served as a collaboration with that. And this collection of work was featured at Clarion University at the Art Gallery. It's for sale on at Watershed Books. So we have copies here. It's also up on Bookshop and Amazon. So make sure that you check that one out. And then several other books that have recently been published on a variety of work. And I would say that in terms of range, there's quite a lot to draw from. Books, The Art of Grilling, poetry about nature, and then Monster in the Kingdom, which is a Grendel, inspired by Grendel's story in Beowulf. So there's an introduction worthy of Byron Hoot, I hope. And without
something more unworthy.
Without further ado, I'd like to let Byron start with his reading, and then we'll get into a few questions for him and allow everyone who is plugged in with us on AirMeet and on Facebook, hopefully too, to be able to ask their own questions, to comment, to say what you think of this recent work. So we're very excited to share this with you.
Well, thanks for showing up today. I'm glad that I showed up more or less on time. But what I'm reading from today is a manuscript of a work in progress entitled The Light Left On, a Poetic Memoir. Most of the poems are new poems. The first one I've written a number of years ago, but it's one of my favorite ones, and the title is Fig Newtons. Whenever I eat fig Newtons, I remember Mrs. Hines, who attended my father's church. We'd pick up her and her kids in a bus that held 12, the gear shift coming out of the floor, the emergency brake, a handle with a grip that needed the strength of a man. We'd visit her, Mom, Dad, and I, park the car on the other side of the creek, and walk across the wooden bridge to the porch. Inside the house, there was a smell of food we never cooked or ate. She'd come out with Fig Newtons, smile, say, for the boy. Then my part of the conversation was over, and one of her kids would find me, and we would play. She was short, stocky, had lost some teeth, and had a smile that wanted to smile at everything, especially pain and life not gone quite right. Her husband was a drunk. Rarely seen, he'd say, Preacher, Mrs., and then would leave. I don't know what they would talk about. Jesus, I suppose, and how he can give strength and comfort any place. And they all knew what they were trying to mean, and Mrs. Hines would smile, say, "Don't that boy like them fig Newtons?" I never eat fig Newtons without remembering Mrs. Hines and her smile and her eyes, a little lost, tired, looking for the unseen. The next poem is titled, "Take Me, but Not All of Me." "I'll give a man anything except my heart," she said, with a smile of bitterness over a heart twice broken she could not let heal. When she was 13, her mother said, "You were a mistake. I gave in to your father and lit him on top of me and stared at the ceiling until he was done, and you come from that moment of weakness and indifference." After that, she ran wild, and her father had to leave his church. The second time her heart shattered was when her fiancé broke her nose with a punch. She never left home, became free and easy, ready for a good time, reminding her mother who she had created, a woman who hated men, except her father, becoming a married man's mistress, and he tried to love her, finally disappearing after decades. The daughter who couldn't love turned to caring for the mother who hadn't wanted her, and they told the lies. Mary's a great girl. Graham, no longer mother, is something for her age. Aunt Mary kept a loaded 6-shooter 22 pistol by her bed to shoot preachers who might knock on the door in the night. Died all alone in a nursing home, and we who remained told one another stories of how she tried to break our hearts with what she called love. The next poem is called Route 8. And when I hit Route 8 north, I'm in the gray Chrysler Imperial going to Oil City on snow cinder-covered roads in the back seat with my sister. Me in some revelry, she silent. Mom and Dad talking softly. I now believe about how far to go, or if Dad, Cub, she'd say, would have to pull off, put the chains on the tires. June, we'll see, he'd say, as the miles we'd driven said, "You've come this far," and the miles ahead saying, "You don't know how far you can go," the road holding a single set of tracks on each side. The Tabernacle. The Tabernacle was immense, sitting in the emotional and spiritual center of the camp on a slight slope that ran from back to front 150 feet long, of 10 by 10 beams, the exposed 2 by 4 framing, the only glass up in the watchtower that no one ever climbed, side doors on railroad tracks to open and close, depending on heat or rain. It stood among the trees, like a temple to focus and contain the Spirit of God in its 2 by 4 pews, wood shavings on the floor, the dirt underneath the altar and platform with the piano on one side, an organ on the other side, the choir behind and above the choir's heads a sign, "Holiness unto the Lord," while men and women would run the aisles, arms waving, a handkerchief in one hand, saying in a lover's pant, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," as the preacher behind the pulpit would wait for the Spirit to leave so he could get to the offering to further the work of the kingdom now and to come, as teenagers moved by love would mouth "I love you" in the ignorance of language, as the preacher would say, "I'll be reading from the Word of God this evening," as camp meeting romances waited for the end of the altar call and the echo of the song, "I surrender all." This next one is entitled Small Rituals. We claim 7, 12, and 5 as holy hours, where we ate simply good food, satisfying to body and soul by eating and answering the litany of questions. What are you doing? How's it going? Need anything? Then the second litany began. Did you get enough? Do you want more? A little more coffee? A little ice cream? A certain grace covered everything. Now I'm an old man. Have certain longings for what seems a time of simplicity and grace. My life not so gently structured by 3 square meals a day. Conversation holding scripture of time and place. Dad saying to Mom, June, you cook good. And the fullness of the intonations of words beyond what I would know only by not having it as once upon a time I did. Just beyond knowing. I don't know the story well. Dad's best friend and fellow preacher married in high school somewhere in the late 1920s, early 1930s. It didn't work. Divorce came and he never remarried. My aunt, another preacher, was in love with him. But he refused her, something to do with the will of God and God's judgment. She married against her heart, and her life showed it. Dad said Jim was the best preacher he'd heard. Dad was the best preacher I ever heard. I don't believe Dad ever prayed for things to be as he wanted things to be, but I have to believe he prayed for Molly Marie and Jim to be together. Jim, no revival at a country church, stayed with the farm family and died from, Dad said, tainted goat's milk. A loss Dad never lost. And Aunt Molly had her heart broken twice. I have to believe that Jim's life and death changed Dad's nature, made it more human, more divine. I know Dad's life and death changed mine. The final poem for now. It's disingenuous, the art of living. I can still, see, and oh God, the man of God, now the man of agony, cried. Oxygen tubes to his nose, his naked 85-pound body in agony, and the prayer, why have you forsaken me, beyond recall. We stood there, Mom and me. It would be a sin to want him to live longer, she said, exactly what she wanted, but differently, the way it had been before they heard he has 3 months to a year. And then the 16 years passed to when the two of us stood there with nothing we could do, no prayers, no curses, the waiting and the silent question and the fact I had a phone call to receive, he's gone, and my reply, I'll be back in just a little while. How true, how false, the art of living proves to be. Thank you.
That's great. You a glass of water in case you were getting thirsty here. Thank you so much for the reading. And certainly my initial reaction is, and I've told you this before, I'm such a fan of work that explores that time of your life, your relationship with your father, these character portraits that you're doing. So I encourage anybody who's listening on AirMeet or wherever you are listening to be send a comment or a question or anything that you have as we're talking here, and we'll make sure.
Some of the comments.
Wonderful, perfect.
We've had some great responses to the reading. Thank you, Byron, for sharing that work. And we have Patricia Thrushart, who is raving about Piercing the Veil. What a wonderful book. William Griffith says, love this car ride poem. Edward Frank, post your link there so people can, if you're looking for Byron's link, you can see it in the comments there. Ray comments, intense juxtaposition of scenes and feelings. And then William Griffiths says divine mind. Nice. Thank you guys.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
We'll get to, having others we'll talk about raising your hand and give everybody a turn to be able to, share comments and get on screen here with
Q&A.
Byron. Yeah, we'll have a Q&A. So before we do that, I wanted to attempt the impossible and see if I can get Byron to reveal some secrets about his work, his practice, and what he just read with us here. So first, I'll start with a really general question because I know that your discipline and your inspiration work really hand in hand. Is that right? Would you say that the more disciplined your writing practice is, the more inspired you are to be able to write every single day?
Yeah, I don't know which comes first. I know that I sit down at the kitchen table every morning and wait. First sip of coffee, second sip, half the coffee, a cup gone. A line comes, and then once the line comes, all I do is to try to follow it and see where it goes. And sometimes I catch it, sometimes I don't. And I think by now I have a pretty good idea when I'm following a line and when I'm putting one down. So I know the difference. Usually when I follow, it's much better than when I put it down. So.
And with this particular series of poems, or the ones that you're developing for this manuscript, was there a conscious effort on your part to do something that seemed a little bit different than the other? I mean, each book that you have is has a different thematic elements, I think. So did that happen for you with
this came from a conversation with Ray Shear and Ray Brigade and Joe Shear. We were talking about memoirs. And I'd written a poem I'd shared with them. And the possibility came up of doing a series of memoir poems. So I thought about it. And then I started writing them, and then I started writing them, and then I started writing them. And so I have roughly, I would say probably 30 poems written. And then I came across some poems I'd written earlier in terms of probably decades earlier, which are memoir poems. And I was pleasantly surprised. One of the fortunate accidents of cleaning out my boxes occurred. So I'll have to visit those poems and see what may or may not work. So.
Is there a difference for you in your approach or in your process or how you feel about the outcome when you're focusing on a subject as kind of an objective observer versus like with the Piercing the Veil poems versus when you're looking really introspectively into your own, time and place in a moment like that?
I don't think in the process there is. What I do tend to find, like in Piercing the Veil, the pictures prompted certain words. And in Runshi, I belong to a couple of Runshi groups. The last line of a poem prompts a poem in response. And it's almost as though the cue somehow makes the process of getting started easier than sitting and waiting. And I don't think it changes the poems necessarily, but except for the beginning, how they begin is a little bit different. But once they begin, it's the same thing of following what comes if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that in much of the work that you've read, whether it's directly about your own life or about other things that you're experiencing or seeing or an observer of, that some of these elements of, the religious element, the imagery, the even verses in some case that come forward, but also this paradoxical element to taking that and flipping it and looking at it differently. So that, would you say that's something that's kind of, are there themes like that fundamentally work themselves into whatever you're doing?
Almost always. the flip side of what is shows itself. Not all the time, but in many of my poems, what I see isn't what's to be seen. There's a bit more, I think.
Are you talking about the shadow of the thing itself, or are you talking about an altogether other?
I'm not talking about the shadow. I'm talking about that which is inside, does not come out. So maybe it is the shadow side, and the shadow is not necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
It could be many good things which have been denied because of convention, societal rules, family taboos, whether they make any sense or not. But you don't talk about that. You don't see things that way.
Yeah, Alan Watts talks about the shadow as not black or emptiness, but as purple, as a flood of colors.
Yeah, well, if Alan Watts said it, I'll probably stick with it.
Well, we do have another guest poet who's joining us. And before we introduce that surprise guest, I'd like to open up to anyone who is in our air meet here who might have a question or comment that they'd like to raise their hand. And you would do that by clicking the hand icon at the bottom of the screen there. And, have a moment to be able to say what you'd like to say. So... anyone with comments or questions? We do. Okay, great.
Who is first? And go ahead and raise your hand. We'll just take you in order. So William Griffiths.
Who?
We're going to pull you on the screen here.
I just had a thought about some types of your poems, and they remind me of slow motion whirling dervishes. That kind of like breath. They're like breath sort of breath whirlwinds. They're spirals, maybe. I don't know. I just thought I'd pass that on.
I like that.
They sort of arise from somewhere deep inside you, and they seem to spiral a lot of times, especially the ones that are talking. So a lot of the religious ones, a lot of the Beowulf ones. Maybe less so. Some of the hunting ones, they're different in some ways, but they have an element of it. I just say that I don't, it's not really a question. I just thought you might get a kick out of it, or. Yeah.
Well, you would know, Willie. My godfather, for those who do not know.
Beautiful reading, Hoot. I like him. I like him a lot.
Thanks.
I like that Oil City one especially, but I like what Dave said too. About Mrs. Hines' smile, finding joy even in the pain. Some of the new ones, Hoot will tell you, I'm a little slow sometimes on the pickup. And, so I have trouble remembering some of the lines. I just know what the ones I like. But I've heard the Oil City one before, and I like it a lot.
Thanks.
All right, Hoot, love you.
Love you,
man. What an interesting, whoever wants to raise next, I just wanted to put in that what an interesting allusion to the whirling dervishes, because of the religious practice that they have of finding God in the movement.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of the writer's journey, is to find a rhythm that can get, whether it's finding God, whether it's finding inspiration, whether it's finding the self. I wonder if there's something about the whirling that takes us outside of the things that we hold on to.
Something like that. I mean, it's. Writing is kind of a religious experience if it's done freely. Like dancing. Best dancing is you don't think about the steps. The steps take you over. And writing is kind of like that for me. When I think about writing, I screw it up. When I let the writing take over, generally it's pretty good. So, but. Yeah.
How many other identities exist in there as well?
I'm not telling you.
All right, we've got our next raised hand. That's still not a touchscreen computer. I'll learn that eventually. Dave Daniel, come on board.
Hey, David.
Hi, Byron.
If you want to click your camera there, if you're welcome to come on with your camera as well.
Okay.
Continue on as you are. Okay.
Hey, David.
Hi, Byron. It's nice to know what an enigmatic poet looks like. So
Ah.
tick that box. But I think is evidenced in the poems you read now. You got this real capacity to observe non-judgmentally, that you withhold any kind of judgment about the people about whom you're writing. And I'm wondering if that is something you work to accomplish. Do you make it a point not to, or is it just the way you see the world, or has it come through training to, obviously there's a great deal of compassion in the eye with which you see the world, but you never look down on what you're seeing. You're always looking at it. So could you comment on that?
I don't think it's a learned response. I think it's a pretty natural response for me, just because I think the complexity of things is complete enough to make judgments suspect. And I think there's all kinds of stories that bear that out. If you see Buddha on the road, kill him. Well, it's the same thing. If you see Jesus on the road, kill him.
Yeah.
The sword of Solomon is withheld because the lie and life is given. And so there are always these koans of experience, which says what you think and what you understand is insufficient. And when things are insufficient, judgment certainly seems hypocritical. And maybe in some ways it's just easier for me not to judge, since it presupposes a knowledge I certainly don't have. So I find it difficult to assume that I know what I can't. So.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you.
Ditto.
Thank you, Dave. All right, is there anybody else who wants to raise their hand? I'll give you one more minute to take a chance there. While I ask the question of, if you are looking at your limits of knowledge and seeing where you're able to show humility and withhold judgment, are you able to then judge yourself on how much judgment you're showing and whether you're balancing the evidence?
I would never ask myself that question.
Okay. Who is the lie behind that?
Because to say I don't make judgments is not that accurate, but I tend not to make judgments. Try not to. I make judgments every day. When it comes to judging human beings, that's a different thing. When it comes to judging ideologies, philosophical positions, psychological insights, sure, I make judgments on those things, but those contribute to rather than are the thing themselves, which is the thing itself is me and you, Just and each of us here. That's a complex creature. So it's hard for me to smack people around. And then do I like and dislike some people? Absolutely. I'm a human being. Do I care to make the judgments that would hurt them? I prefer not to. But I don't think like that, Sarah. So.
Okay. Well, you're welcome. Maybe that'll
maybe I should.
Let's call for any questions or comments. If you want to click that raise hand button, and if not, we're going to bring on our special surprise guest poet. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Patricia, you're not leaving. You get to.
I'm not leaving.
Yeah, let's see how I can find you. Patricia Thrushhart is here. Oh, she's helping me out here, raising her hand. She is. I'll let you guys jump on.
Would you introduce Patricia for us, Byron?
Please, no. I don't know if I trust him.
Doesn't know too much.
I think you should introduce her, Justin.
All right. So I'm so excited to have Patricia Thrushhart because she's one of the Watersheds and my favorite poets, but as well as Byron. But also she has a brand new book out of poetry. And so that's one of the things that makes her appearance today extra exciting. And so Sanctity is now out. You can look it up on Bookshop, on the Watershed Bookshop storefront. It's also on Amazon, and we are very hopeful that we'll have copies here at the store very soon. So Patricia has published other books of poetry before, Yin and Yang, Girl Against the Wall, and those copies are at Watershed Books and available at the locations that we mentioned. And then she also writes historical, research-based nonfiction books focusing specifically on underrepresented, marginalized voices, women's voices from history that she works to uncover and shine a light on. So her poetry really varies in terms of very much inspired by nature and the forest, Pennsylvania forest in which she lives and observes life, but also dealing with very poignant again, portrait pieces and also, very relevant pieces in terms of what's happening in the world. And so we're so thrilled to have you. And my understanding is that you're going to read from Sanctity today.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Jess. And thanks to Byron for inviting me. I am going to read from Sanctity, and it's backwards probably on your screen. And the bookstore will have physical copies soon. In the meantime, as Jess said, you can get them through their virtual storefront. And I'm really, it's really special for me to be here because Byron is a really important beta reader for me in my poetry. I would venture to say the one thing Byron does almost as well as his writing poetry is providing feedback to other poets. He has a magical way of distilling the poem to the right balance of image and feeling. And many of the poems in this book were edited after his beta read of them, or either that or I ignored him completely. But he's used to that. No, we have a wonderful opportunity together to share feedback through Writer's Block Party, through the Fernwood Writers Retreat, and even just through our collaboration. So I appreciate that and really appreciate being here today. So I'm just the book Sanctity is a book of nature poetry, and it really reflects the fact that I am tremendously blessed to live in the forest here in northern Appalachia, and it's a huge character in my life, a huge presence in my life. So the book is all drawn from living in the forest, and I organized it by seasons. Because the forest changes so much in each season. So I'm going to read, starting with winter, since we're in winter, I'm just going to read one poem from each of the chapters. And then I'll be back on February 7th here at the Watershed Books to read more poetry and discuss it. And who knows, I might have a special guest too. So the first poem is called Ghost Deer. I saw the brown doe first, ears flicked forward, frozen in the way prey have when the scent of a predator is in the air. And her fawn, white, small, luminous, above the trembling ferns, cream-petaled dewberry. For some, she'd be an omen, for others, a trophy. I saw the frailty of her unnatural beauty, of her pink eyes. They fled from me, leaving behind the ghost of life's impermanence, its fragility. I looked for her again. I wanted to know if she survived the winter, but she never appeared. I imagined her far away, taking all the assurances I needed with her. So we have spring to look forward to, and so I'll read a poem from this chapter, Spring. Swallow. Have you seen how the swallow flies in early spring over a still sodden field just greening, careening, twisting with lifts of abandon, rolling through unseen streams of just rinsed air after rain. And your heart lifts with it, lifts with the pure joy of it, lurches left with its bronzed body, then dives with it as blue wings fold until just above the still dried stalks, the slender tips extend and the whole of the bird shoots up, up, up to the dazzling sun. And soon it'll be summer, one of my favorite times of year because I love to garden. And so I'm going to read this poem from the summer section. It's called Solace. Just when I think the last of solace is gone, the air grows soft with the sighs of grosbeaks hidden in the pines. Unseen, they murmur each to the other, content with the lengthening light, the promise of rain, the fullness of seed they will feed their young, whose nests swing in the wind, who sleep to the sound of sweet whistles and the whispers of where solace has gone and how it might return on the wings of birds. And then the last poem I'll read, and thanks again to Byron for inviting me and Watershed Books for having me, is a poem that represents autumn. It's called Path. There's a path that runs to the east, the grass grown up from neglect, only the faintest denting from deer moving through the night. On certain days, the drifting sun rises directly there, the light slithering along the weedy heads of seed, through the trees, reaching me as I wait, like a sacrifice in the temple aligned to catch the golden snake, or a priestess at Newgrange praying as the solstice sun pierces the passage to anoint the dead. I wait, the trees aflame above, the ground glowing from burnished leaves, the sky growing brighter, the light's shaft coiling, ready to crack open my heart. So those are the seasons we have to look forward to. And again, thanks very much.
Good poems. Good poems.
Thank you so much, Joe. We've got some comments here from your pieces. Ray should let you into the house so you don't have to live in the woods. One that it sounded very concerned for your well-being. And then Ray comments, "Holy cow!" And then "Lifting with the swallow, priestess at the New Grange," and great poems. So great job. If anybody has any questions or comments for Patricia Thrushard, let's see what we got here. Ray comments just to make sure everyone knows that he's coming at this with a clean slate of pure human interaction.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
You too, and or Patricia, and we will see you on February 7th. Also see you on January 24th, 2 weeks from now. Patricia has put together a make and take journal making event where there's going to be kits for sale here at Watershed Books that contain a book to work with, Mod Podge, applicator, ephemera, textural elements. And then on 2 o'clock on the 24th, she'll do a live event through GoToMeeting. And you'll be able to craft together as well as talk about the art of crafting or the art of journaling. So anyway, that should be a really fun event. So thank you, Joe.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then next week, between now and the crafting event, we have Octavia Knight, which will, she is another poet. She's just put out a book, Faceless Expressions, and it'll be a whole different kind of event. She's a great writer and a really interesting person, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then, is there anything else you want to say about
Winter edition's coming.
Winter edition is coming very soon. We'll be able to put out that date very soon.
Byron has a poem. One of the poems that he read today will be debut in the Winter edition.
I'll have to look which
You
one
submitted two, and they were both ones that you read today.
So it'll be a surprise to you which one is in the journal. So if you have submitted, you'll be getting emails today about information about which pieces got in, and then we'll also be sending out information about pre-orders. Submitters get a special discounted pre-order price if you're interested in getting some copies for cheaper. So continue to check out our website, thewatershedjournal.org/calendar. We'll show you all of the amazing events that we have going on here. We're booked up almost through March with some great stuff. And if you are a local author and you have a book out and you want to do an event like this, reach out. If you have a whole different kind of idea for a literary event that you'd like to put on, get a hold of us and we'd love to put you on the schedule. So thank you for joining in. Jess, did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm good.
Nope. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Byron.
Joy always to be surrounded by pretty women at my age, and smart ones too. So that's creative.
I'll take that.
And creative talent. So that's thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you, Byron, so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.